Welcome back to Portable Power Repair Secrets. Today we have a pair of APC model Back-UPS 450 uninterruptible power supplies. Now got these from the store a couple weeks ago. They had stickers on them. They were discarded by a local hospital. And here's what they're doing. So you can see that the unit is making a racket. The power button is blinking red. You turn off the power. It does run on battery for a few seconds. Lots of racket. The other thing I notice, the cabinet gets pretty warm. Now the air temperature in here. The garage is at about 60 degrees. This is running close to 90 degrees. Obviously this is intolerable. What does it mean? It means that we have a bad battery. So, alright, let's turn that off. So why would people throw these away? Why wouldn't you just change the battery? Well, I think the main reason for that is in the owner's manual. So right here on page 8, the battery in the backup UPS is not user replaceable. Huh, who wrote that? Bill Clinton?
Utterly false statement. Is that correct?
It depends upon what the meaning of the word is.
Yes.
That's like saying that the batteries in cars are not replaceable by car drivers. Of course they're replaceable. So this is just not true. But I think people see this and they discard these APC units. I know the store hardly can go to the store without seeing one or two of these in the recycling shed. So today we're going to take this apart and prove that statement to be untrue. Now the tool that you're going to need to do this is a number 1 screwdriver with a 4-inch shaft. Most number 1 screwdrivers only have 3-inch shafts, and 3 inch is not long enough to fit down into that hole. So here's a standard number 1 Phillips 3-inch shaft. This is a standard number 2 Phillips 4-inch shaft. So why can't we just use a number 2? Well, the tip is too large. The tip is much larger than the tip that we need. So this goes into the unit, but it just won't turn the screw that's down there. So that's your tool. Number 1 Phillips, referring to the size of the tip, 4-inch shaft. That's going to work perfectly. Let's give it a shot. Oh, the other thing you might want, not absolutely necessary, this is a magnetizer demagnetizer. This magnetizes the tip so that you can pull the screws right out when you remove them. Now, we're going to time this. Let's see how long it's going to take me to remove these 4 screws. Okay, go. I'm just twisting by hand. Nope, didn't get it. There it is. 1. 2. 3. 4. That's it. How long did that take? Now obviously we're disconnected from power here. Next step is just to pull this up. And there's our battery. All right, we can just lay this aside. Now the first thing to notice, the battery is upside down. That's the way it goes into this case. And that's because these cases are made to sit upright. So when you flip this, the battery is actually, that would be the bottom, sitting on the table. So the next thing to notice, when you pull this battery out, we're going to pull straight up. Note that the black wire is on the left side, the red wire is on the right side. So that's how you're going to put it back together. Now these clips, they're made to be pulled off. A little trouble with my old hands. So you can just use, this is a little tiny number 1 slotted screwdriver. Just pry underneath here. See right here? Pry underneath to get them started. And here's your battery. Now obviously I've had this off before. It's like a hot potato right now, I'm going to tell you. Pretty hot. And that's your battery. Okay, now the first thing about the battery, we want to notice that it's a 12 volt battery. This one's MHB, part number MS 4.5.12. The 12 volt is important because when you look this up online, even at places like Home Depot, you may get a page that says this unit takes a 6 volt battery. I don't know if there are any APC Back-UPS 450s that take a 6 volt battery. I know that neither of these do. They both have 12 volt batteries. So 12 volt, not 6 volt, not in these units. All right, the next thing. Positive is on the left. As we hold these terminals, these are terminals, not screw terminals, they're push-on terminals. Back when we sold push-on connectors at Lafayette Radio in the 70s, these were called fast-on, F-A-S-T-O-N connectors. Let's measure them to see what size connector those are. All right, I got my digital caliper. 1/4 inch. Hope the camera's seeing that. 1/4 inch. Let's try the other side. Quarter inch. Okay, now as I remember, 1/4 inch means that these are fast-on number 2 connectors, so they would be F2 connectors. There's a smaller F1 connector that's only 3/16 of an inch. These are definitely 1/4 inch They're F2s. And yet, a lot of times when you look up a battery for these APS, UPS 450s, they'll say F1 connectors. So they would be smaller. Now, I guess if it's smaller, these females would still grab onto it. But just an interesting thing, these are 1/4-inch connectors, males. Now the next thing, since you can't trust any of the specifications that are, especially on Amazon, you can't trust any of that stuff. The battery that just came out of here is known as a left-hand battery. How do we know that? Because when you put the terminal side towards your body, just put this up against your stomach, the positive terminal is on the left. That means it's a left-hand battery. Now, why would not a right-hand battery work? Well, because the wires that are inside this unit, notice that the positive only comes to here. Look how much longer the negative is. If these were reversed, the positive wire would not be long enough to engage the positive terminal. So we want a left-hand battery, 12 volt. These are F2 connectors, 1/4-inch, unless I'm mistaken. These are 1/4-inch connectors. There's no mistaking about that. Now the next thing, size. Very often they don't give you the size of the battery, or they'll give it to you in 2 spots and they don't agree with each other. So let's measure this, because I can tell you that the fit in here is very tight. You don't have a lot of room to put in a bigger battery. All right, we're going to come across the top. So I've got 3 and 17/32. Let's see what we can do about, that's millimeters. I got 3.533 inches. So let's call that 3.5 inches. So what would that be? That would be called length. Not width, that would be the length of it, 3.5 inches. And this would be the width of it. Call that 2.8 inches width. And this would be the height of it. Looks like I got a little over 3.9 inches tall. So those are your dimensions. Now shame on APC for not giving you this information. They make it exceptionally difficult to purchase the right battery. I can't speak for any other units. I can only tell you that we had 2 different batteries in these units. They're both exactly the same physical size. They both have 1/4-inch fast-on connectors, males. They're both left-hand batteries, and they're both 12 volt. So these are the things you have to know before you order a new battery. All right, the final thing we might like to know is the weight of this battery. Now, the heavier the battery, the more lead that would be in it, and the longer it would last. If you got a battery exactly this same size that weighed a lot less, then it would mean that instead of having lead plates inside, there was just a blank area that was empty space. And because it weighed less, then that battery wouldn't last as long. So let's weigh this so we know what it's supposed to be. Okay, we're in pounds. Let's go pounds and ounces. There's pounds and ounces. We get 3 pounds, 2.2 ounces. Let's go shopping for a battery. Now this Leoch, I'm not sure how you pronounce that. We'll say Leoch, model DJW12-4.5, was the better of the 2 batteries in these units. So let's try to get a second one to replace the dead MHB battery. that's what we're going to look for. So I'm here at Amazon, and this listing says Li-Arch battery DJW12-4.5 replacement. Well, the price is right. It's $18. So we should order it, right? Well, no. Just to be sure, I'm going to go to the left here and click on this second image, see what it says. Now I've overlaid the specifications that we measured. And we'll look at the specifications that they're showing us here in this second image. We measured a width of 2.8 inches. And they measure a width of 5.14 inches. That's twice as much. Our length was 5.5 inches. This one is 7.72 inches long. Much longer. The height of our battery was 3.9 inches. This one's a whopping 6.14 inches high. Never going to make it. And we weighed this battery in at 3.145 pounds. The weight is not given here, but it is given further down in the specifications. So here we see that the weight of this battery is 3.5 pounds, just a little more than what we weighed. But we've got different length, width, and height here. And what they're showing here almost exactly matches what we actually measured. So if we order this battery, what are we going to get? Are we going to get this one? Or are we going to get the one shown in that other graphic? And it's like this everywhere. I think I'm going to pass. So I guess by now it's pretty clear that the powers that be don't want you replacing this battery. Okay, so I agree. I'm not going to replace it. I'm not spending money on a battery, especially given the confusion, and especially when I have so many much larger batteries hanging around the garage here. Boat batteries, lawn tractor batteries, generator batteries, this is an old car battery. So yeah, how are we going to connect up one of those external batteries to this? Well, we know that the connectors, these here, measure 1/4 of an inch. So 3/8 hole, 1/4 of an inch is 2/8. 3/8 gives you the extra eighth. 3/8 hole located right there. Right where these two boxes come together, right in the middle. That works. A better location would have been out the side, but the side has these vents, and drilling through the vents you most likely just make a big mess here and crack everything. So for better or worse, I drilled a hole in the back. You start with an 1/8 inch drill and then use a 1/4 inch drill, then come up to a 3/8, and it works perfectly. So that's what I'm going to do. And whether you're going to do it or not while you have it apart, you might want to put that hole there. And these wires come through, actually the ones on the inside are going to come through here, and they come through just fine. These are the parts you need to make the external battery cable. So first we have our 1/4 inch male spade connectors. We need 2 of those. We need a length of red and black wire. This is 14 gauge automotive wire. Should be fine. And we need a pair of alligator clips. Now even small clips like this will be fine. But if you're buying alligator clips, probably something this size would serve better. But this is what I had, so this is what we used. Now here are your CarQuest part numbers for the red and black wire. I guess C14EB must be black and C14ER must be red. Now, what you might also want, this is a 14 gauge fuse holder. Gauge. It has a 10 amp fuse in here. That's much larger than what we need for this. And this cable really is not long enough. But you might want to think about putting a fuse in this line, just in case by accident these two connectors should touch us. This is like any jumper cable. There's always a danger that these two are going to touch, which would make a big spark. There's a 40 amp fuse on the battery line inside the uninterruptible power supply. We're not pulling anywhere near 40 amps. Maybe a 1 amp fuse here would be fine. 5 amp might be the smallest automotive fuse you're going to find. This is a 10. Okay, so these are the parts you need. I don't think you can buy this cable ready-made. You most likely are going to have to make it yourself. So here's a close-up of the wires that we made. This is the female coming through our 3/8 inch hole, positive and negative. The cable has a male, just plugs in. This joint where the male has been soldered is covered with shrink tubing. A larger piece of shrink tubing slides up and covers the exposed metal. Same on this side. Shrink tubing here. This is factory shrink tubing on that end. Then a larger piece of shrink tubing slides up and covers that metal. I didn't shrink these. I think that's good enough. They're tight there. That way if I want to put longer ones on, I can. Now, I already had these. Have some pretty big alligator clips on this end. If I didn't already have these and I was making them up from scratch, I think these leads are a little short. These are about 1 foot long. I'm thinking that 2 to 3 feet, depending upon your situation. Like if this battery was on the floor, so if we were putting this battery on the floor, we certainly would need a long enough cable to make it there. Consider car jumper cables. I think the shortest I've ever seen might be 10 feet. Well, we're not jumping a car, but at least 4 or 5 feet to make it to the floor. Well, that's for you to decide. Now, let's see how this would fit. Okay, black to negative. Red to positive. We've got our 3/4 inch cable clamps on that battery and we're ready to go. So she's turned on, she's working. It'll run on battery power. We should see 2 blinks as soon as this kicks out. I like it a lot better when I have my meters on there monitoring what's going on. I think this is a much better setup than the little dinky battery that comes with it from the factory. And especially if you can't buy another one of these, this works just as good, in my opinion, if not better. A lot better. So let's see what's going on over here. I've got it all connected. Everything's back together and all connected. The red meter is an amp meter. It shows that the APC unit is charging this car battery at a little over half an amp. Let's round that off to 0.6 of an amp. And my Fluke 12 is showing that the battery is currently up to 12.83 volts. We're on power. I'm going to turn the power off. We'll see what happens. I want you to notice we have no negative or positive sign here. It's just 0.57 amps. So that's what we're putting into the battery. Now we're going to go on battery backup, see what happens. Watch for a negative sign here, because now the juice is going to be flowing from the battery to the backup unit, not from the backup unit to the battery. Okay, that tells us that we just lost power. 2 blinks shows that we're on battery power, and we're drawing 0.3 of an amp from the battery. And we see our battery is holding at 1236. Now take a look here. So this is 3 pounds, 4 ounces. This is like 54 pounds. That's 18 times the capacity of this. Does that mean it will last 18 times longer? You bet. Pretty close to that. Much better deal. Give you a lot longer run time. Okay, so in the manual it tells you how to turn off all alarms. But for the moment, we were putting 0.6 of an amp into the battery. We're drawing 0.3 of an amp out of the battery. That tells us how thick the wire has to be. And this 14 gauge automotive wire is just fine. Because whether I had thought about this or not, okay, you've got that alarm turned off. And I didn't realize it at the time, but what we just made is a battery maintainer. This is the kind of thing that you would use to put your boat battery or your lawn tractor battery on charge. It doesn't overcharge the battery, it just keeps it topped off. And this is what we use here in the Northeast to keep our equipment charged over the winter time, so that it starts right up again in the spring. And these are typically about 500 mils. This one is 550 mils, I think it says right there. So yeah, that's what we got here, 570 mils. We just made one of these. So what we have is a backup power unit that will last a very, very long time on battery, because we've got it on this big car battery. But for most of us, we really don't want an uninterruptible power supply. What we're actually looking for, if I'm going to use this in the shop, this is a nice power strip. Plus I've got another battery maintainer. So good deal. Now the reason I'm showing you these meters, if you look at the wire on this battery maintainer, I'm going to say that that's 16 gauge. I'm going to say that these wires on this cheap little Harbor Freight meter are maybe 16 gauge, certainly no more than that. And we made our cables out of 14 gauge, so anything between 14 and 16 gauge should be more than enough, perfect actually, for your jumper cable. And that's how we decided on the wire gauge to use. So 14 gauge automotive is pretty standard, and that's what we got from CarQuest. Okay, what else are we going to need? Also have some shrink tubing to cover the connectors so that they don't short out. And where do you get stuff like this? Well, typically you would buy a kit. They come in boxes like this, tackle boxes, full of different size connectors. Of course, you don't need hundreds of them, but so long as you have something with even a couple of these 1/4-inch males, you should be all set. Now, a good question. How do we attach these little alligator clips to an automotive battery? Well, the easiest way is to just clamp on some hose clamps. And the two I have on here right now are 3/4-inch. So these are 3/4-inch diameter hose clamps. They go on fine. This is a 1/4-inch nut driver. That's what you use to tighten the nut down. Okay, now how long does it take to charge a big battery like this one? Well, I would say by tomorrow this will be fully charged. It started out, it was rather low, had not been on-charged. So overnight should be more than enough. I've noticed from various experiments, it starts charging at about that rate, and then as the battery gets full, this will get less and less and less and less, and will drop to 0 so that the battery doesn't overcharge. So how do we connect the amp meter? The red wire from the back of the unit goes to the amp socket on the meter. So that's positive from the back of the unit, would be the red wire, goes to the amp socket on the meter. Meter is set to 10 amps. And then the black test lead from the meter actually goes to the positive terminal on the battery. So essentially you're just intercepting the positive lead. Now what happens if you get this backwards? Not going to hurt a thing. You're just going to get a negative sign here when charging. It just means you've hooked it up backwards. It's no big deal. And of course, this is just set to DC volts. So this would be, I have it connected back here. This would just go across your battery. Now, if you don't already have a big battery to play with, you're probably going to be better off with something like this that has screw terminals. Be much easier to attach your alligator clips. So that's our first surprise. Without realizing it, we made a very nice power strip with battery maintainer. And it works quite well because I've tested it for about the past month. So yeah, I'm quite confident in this unit as a battery maintainer. Every bit as good as those little Harbor Freight units. And we've got all these outlets. Now I've hooked up a third meter to this apparatus, and right now we're on line voltage. Shows 121 volts AC. And I've got a little fan connected to it, blowing up a storm. And this is where it gets very interesting. Because while we have a nice battery maintainer with a big battery that can last for hours and hours and hours, watch what happens when I turn off the power. The fan slows down almost to a stall. And look what happened to our AC voltage. This Fluke 10 meter shows 90 volts, 89.6. This little Harbor Freight amp meter shows that we're drawing 1.3 amps from the battery. That's what the negative sign means. This Fluke 12 is showing us that our battery, which has only been on charge here for about a half hour, a little over 12 volts. It's going to take overnight to get that up to over 13 volts. The two blinks down here on the green light show that we're on battery power. But what kind of power are we talking about? And what just happened here? Well, we're going to have a lot more to say about this in the next episode. Because as a battery backup unit, as an uninterruptible power supply, this thing's just not very good. Now, what does the manual have to say about that? So right here on page 6, where my thumb is, connected equipment does not accept the step-approximated sine wave from the Back-UPS. And it tells you here, the output waveform is intended for computers and peripheral devices. It is not intended for use with motor-driven equipment. Well, I guess that's why it doesn't like the fan. But what's really going on here is this brownout. We're averaging around 90 volts AC. All right, let's see how it does with computers. Okay, so I've turned off the fan and I've plugged in a laptop. You recognize her? That was Yinty. She was my shop greeter. Hung around the garage. That's a little fence outside. She's in a pot of catnip. Greeted everyone that came in here. She lived a good life. She passed away, must have been 18, 20 years old. Missed her quite a bit. Anyways, we've got this laptop plugged into the backup power unit. We're actually on battery power right now. We can see that the Back-UPS is putting out 102 volts, doing a lot better powering this laptop than powering the fan. And this is a typical type of thing that you'll see in government agencies, social service agencies. They plug their laptops into an uninterruptible power supply. But does that even make any sense? Because watch, I'm going to lose, here's the AC adapter. I'm going to unplug it and we're going to lose power. Watch what happens. Absolutely nothing. Because every laptop already has an uninterruptible power supply. It's called the laptop battery. So you don't need an external uninterruptible power supply unit to power a laptop in the event of a power failure. It runs perfectly fine. There's no interruption, no danger of losing any data. It works fine. But you see this all the time. So yeah, you can plug it into an uninterruptible power supply and you can tell all your employees to immediately shut down their laptops. I guess it works. Doesn't make any sense to me. And I would not want to plug... You can't even power a little laptop like this at full voltage? Well, this is getting very, very interesting. Honestly, you don't want to miss the next episode. So, we'll talk about this more there. As a battery maintainer, Pretty neat. As an uninterruptible power supply, well, I'm much better with a big battery on it, but not that impressive. Not impressive at all. But there is a third use for this. As a multimeter tester, this is an unexpected bonus. So we'll talk about that next time, and I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.